What if the story you've been living your whole life wasn't actually the truth?
What if it was just a set of old beliefs created years ago that are still running the show today?
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Milt.
And this is Rewrite Your Story, the podcast where we explore how the narratives in your head shape your life
and how you can begin rewriting them with clarity, compassion, and tools you can actually use.
Let's dive in.
Welcome back, everyone.
I convinced Milt to do the introduction today because he doesn't like to do it, but I think he did great.
Yeah, I did wonderful. I'm so excited to do it.
Oh, you're fine.
We're working on uncomfortableness. Great.
It's true.
All right, you have show and tell today.
I do have show and tell today. So I have this little, I don't even know what these are called. It's a fidget.
They're like cool Rubik's Cubes, though.
Yeah.
But they're like art Rubik's Cubes.
Yeah. I actually stole this from my mom. So my mom is a teacher and she used to be subscribed to like little teacher box things that would come monthly. Pretty cool. And this came in one of them. And I was like, oh, I want that. And I absolutely love it because it's easy. Like I can just do it with one hand and it doesn't take a lot of focus because it can only go two ways. And there's only one way that I really like it to go. And then it also is really cute because it has like little affirmations and sayings and stuff. And it just creates cool designs. Like it's very fascinating while also still being not too distracting, which I appreciate. So it's kind of loud though. I think that's my only thing against it is that it can be a little loud.
I think the hardest things with fidgets is that if they make a lot of noise, then they draw attention.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I don't like
very
that.
true. Yeah, especially if it's like it's because this one's like a clicky, like it clicks and then there's like a little shaking, like ball sound almost. It's the joints, obviously, like bending and stuff. But yeah.
Cool beans. We were going over our guiding principles, and we thought we were going to get through all of them, but we ended up only getting through 4, 3, and 1.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah,
gonna
I
kind
feel
of
like I'm realizing we have this idea of what we want to do, and then we just get so into it that we only ever get through like a portion of the idea.
which is okay, because then we realize that we're not trying to soak you with the fire hose as opposed to. And I think it's important, like if we just rehash a little bit, because you're going to rehash principle 1 a little bit as we go into this, because I mean, of course, it's a principle that goes over a lot of things, but these aren't rules.
Yeah.
Like, they're principles, they're ideas, they're philosophies. In DBT, they're called assumptions. They're not rules, so we're not trying to prove them as much as we're trying to use them. And
Yeah.
it's like the biggest thing is it's not so much that we're promising that if you live this way, your life's going to be better. However, life is typically better when you're living a set of values and you're amplifying those. And so these are just ways to try to value yourself. And I think it's kind of steps on how to value you as opposed to, just trying to figure it out on your own.
I think when I was first introduced to just the idea of the 7 assumptions too, it helped in lessening the frustration that I felt, especially the first one. So even with our guiding principles, it's people are doing the best they can with what they have in this moment. And that just it takes a lot of again like that frustrate the intensity of the frustration away when reality isn't what I want, right? Or isn't
Yeah.
going the way that I want, or people aren't doing. I have a little bit of control issues. I've realized over the last 27 years. And so when things are out of my control and I can't do anything about other people and their reactions, it helps to recognize like they are doing what they can with what they have in this moment. And accepting that for what it is rather than trying to fight against it has lessened that, again, just frustration and suffering, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That leads us into where we're at. Take it
So
away, Victoria.
So we got into the clarity anchors, and that was the principle 4. So all behaviors, thoughts, and emotions are caused, remembering that like there's a reason for everything, whether we can think of it. And then we got into principle 3, which was where we talked about like that generalization when it comes to learning new things and practicing things in new ways, especially with effectiveness. It's not just if we're in that controlled setting, it's going to look very differently when we're out of a controlled setting and there's those different variables and vulnerability factors and stuff. And so that's where we ended last week. And so this week we're getting into the compassion anchors. And so this kind of leads into parts work, so internal family systems. But we talked about this, it's brought up the idea of like these fractured strategies.
I love
And
this idea.
yeah, I think this is really cool because when we are introduced to parts work, one of the principles that IFS has is that all of our parts are trying to do what they think is best for our system.
There's no bad parts. That's the rule.
Yes. Yeah, there's no bad parts. And so if we recognize that the things that we are doing, even if they are not effective or if they are harmful or whatever, there's a part of us that believes though that that is the best way that it can survive the situation or help us through whatever it is that we're dealing with. And I think that can be kind of hard to really wrap your head around, because if we look at things like extremes, so like self-harm or addiction or whatever those might be, it can be hard to say like, well, how can I possibly think that that is the best way to approach this situation? And we have to take that step back and remember, like, when these parts of us are formed and when these things kind of come out, that is what got us through that moment. That is what helped us survive that moment. It's just falling back on those old behaviors and those old patterns, because that's what helped in that certain situation to help us get out of it.
It's either what helped or it helped us to get through the pain of it, and then it also helped us to make it so that we don't ever go back to that pain again. It's not just a strategy to get through, but it's also a roadmap to never feel that pain again. Think about a 6-year-old. Like, what's hard to a 6-year-old? Like being embarrassed in front of everyone, the wetting your pants or things like that. Like, so you're going to put these strategies up so you don't ever go back to those things. I remember if anyone ever commented on something I wore, I noted that so that I tried to either not wear that or not be around that person who didn't like what I wore, because I didn't want to get teased, because for whatever reason, teasing to me felt like the worst.
Yeah. I like that example. I think what came to my mind was, I don't know if any of you are into astrology, but I'm a Leo. And so the stereotypes of Leos are, oh, they're self-absorbed, they're so self-centered, like all of these things that talking about yourself feels like it's a bad thing, right? And so I kind of developed this concept of, I don't want to talk about myself. Like it makes me uncomfortable. I would much rather sit and observe things and other people and what's happening around me rather than speak. Milt made a comment today about how he talked a lot in the last episode, and I kind of realized like, oh, well, that's because like that is that part coming out and not wanting to draw attention. And so yeah, I think it's really cool to recognize where these parts kind of formed and the protective strategies that they're taking to make it so that we aren't feeling that pain again for whatever reason, wherever it might have come from. And so that's where principle 1 kind of comes back into this, right? So not only are we, when we're thinking of these principles, we're not only wanting to apply them to other people and situations outside of ourselves, but also internally, right? And so recognizing my parts are doing the best that they can with what they have. Usually they're coming from a moment that was in the past, but they don't recognize that. So when we think about reactions, and it kind of goes into like fight, flight, or freeze, right? So if someone is yelling at us and our automatic reaction to that is to just clam up, right? And to like not say anything and to just let them yell, and maybe we kind of dissociate, we go somewhere out of our body, whatever it might be. That is us doing the best that we can in that moment with the situation that's happening, with the automatic things that our body feels and that our parts feel and that we think will get us through this situation in the safest way possible. That can have consequences though, right? Like if we're not standing up for ourselves, or if we feel like we are being taken advantage of and we're not saying anything, that's where that kind of
But it also gets
disconnect.
into why we stay stuck.
Yeah.
Like so you're describing all these things, but the problem is you don't see a way out of them because your body's not, it wants to stay exactly where it is. And so if this strategy works, why would it change it? Because it's avoiding the pain.
Yeah. And it's comfortable with what it knows. And getting out of that comfort zone and that box is scary.
Well, and I thought of a metaphor, and I don't know if it's going to work. So we're going to see. So I wanted to kind of come up with a way that felt non judgmental with fractured strategies. So if we take, like, I haven't lived in a new house except for once in my life. So every house that I've lived in has been old. The house that I live in now was 95, so not very old, but old enough. The house that I mostly lived in growing up was, I think it was built in the 70s. Older houses. And the difference between old and new is that theoretically we expect everything to work in new. But in old, we're okay when things don't exactly work. As long as the basic function of the house is the same, that it keeps me relatively safe, my stuff is secure, I'm warm, I'm sort of protected, whatever it is. And I think that's a good way of looking at fractured strategies. I'm completely okay in a house that's older that doesn't have things that work exactly right, as long as they work enough. So we just changed out the faucet at our house because we have really hard water down here and we don't have a water softener. So it probably just over calcified. Either way, we changed it out. And it's amazing the water pressure that I have now in the new faucet. And I didn't realize how much I had gotten less water pressure, except for the areas that were plugged up because hard water. But it was really interesting. Like, I have been observing this, like, and now I expect that pressure to be there all the time. And if it's not there all the time, I'm going to be upset. But it took me, we've lived in our house now for 11 years. And we got this new faucet probably like 2 years in. And it never fit, but we made it fit. And we just worked with it because initially we bought it because it worked. Again, it's a fractured strategy. It's not a bad strategy. We made it work. And then eventually it got to the point where it wasn't working and then it wouldn't turn off. And so we eventually had to trade it out. But look at the thing that it had to do for us to finally get it to change it out. And that's kind of what, to me, that's a way of looking at fractured strategies that doesn't feel like we're saying these are bad. It's that you can maintain really poor strategies or ineffective strategies as long as they're keeping you afloat. So it's almost going through life with, like, the floaties on your
Yeah.
arm. And, like, you can swim with them and you can actually swim a long way with them because you can rest and you can, like, just float. And that's a way of looking at, I don't know, it's a way of looking at life that makes sense because we only really change strategies in our life when we have to, which is why we're doing the best we can where we are at, unless we really have to change.
Yeah. And I think that can come in a bunch of different forms too, whether that's like big situations, like maybe traumatic situations that we have to change from, or even we talk about when we're in our groups, like our values change, right? And it takes a
Yeah.
lot for our values to change and for us to grow in that sense. But think about if you are constantly in that position of conflict where you freeze or you fawn and you don't take that approach of maybe standing up for yourself. And I'm using this as an example because this is me. I am this.
You're the water
And
faucet that hasn't broke yet.
I'm the water faucet that just hasn't broke yet. But then I got to a point in my life where I was like, why am I constantly allowing people to tell me how I should feel or tell me what I should do and not standing up for myself? It kind of created this internal dissonance of I don't like how I feel when I don't stand up for myself, or I don't like how I feel when I don't set a boundary with someone and tell somebody this isn't okay. And this is still in the process. I'm still working on this and like building this ability and this skill. But it took that internal discomfort of like, I am feeling bad about myself. And I'm like that internal dialogue of like, why am I worthless? Why can't I just stand up for myself? Why am I not doing this? Why am I like that kind of shame and that judgment and guilt to finally say, like, well, this is what I can start to do. And this is maybe a new way to approach this situation. And again, it's still in the process, but it allowed me to go from that internal judgment and that shame to recognizing, one, obviously, like where that part came from and why that strategy felt like it was the only way, as far as like it kept me safe. It kept me from having even more conflict and arguments. It kept me from feeling like I was embarrassing myself in one way or another. There were so many reasons for it and why I held on to it for so long and why I still hold on to it in certain situations. And I can take a new approach now too. And I can start to like implement new strategies and new behaviors that help me feel better about myself. That makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. And I like the idea that it's not going to just change overnight, because like even what you were talking about, like this trying to get away from the fawning, you're probably going to go back to it at some point. And part of the reason we go back to it, you kept using this word why. When you figure out that this is why you're doing it, your body almost reinforces going back to it, because now you have a reason and you're generally okay with that reason. Or even if you say you're not, your body's okay with that reason, because your body's used to doing the same thing over and over again. It likes repetition, it likes homeostasis, staying in your normal. And so once your brain has a why that it likes, it'll go back to it. So then you have to actually work harder to keep the change lasting. I was thinking about this in my faucet. I have to address the hard water if I want that pressure to stay. That means I have to go do something else in my house. You're going to have to do something else to keep pushing yourself to talk and stand up for yourself. You're going to have to keep doing that because your body's going to want to go back to the why.
Yeah.
Because once we have a why, we're really comfortable. We like whys.
Yeah. It reinforces that,
Mhm.
like you're saying, comfortability and that kind of comfort zone for sure. Because like the justification, I think that's what it is. We can justify it when we have that why sometimes. So, yeah. Kind of leading into this next principle. So, principle 2, people want to improve and move toward growth and connection. To be so honest, this is one of the like hardest principles for me to believe. And it's weird because like I can look at somebody that just did something that I'm like, why the F did you just do that? And I can say, oh, they're doing the best that they can with the skills that they have. But believing that they want to improve, I think is so difficult because if they're just continuing to do the same behavior over and over again, then there's that thought of like, well, do they actually want to? Because if they wanted to, they would. Right. And that being said, that's why these are, again, like our guiding principles. They're not rules. We're not saying that these are going to make life a million times better. They do help though. And if we can take that step back and we can recognize like everyone does have some type of desire to grow in some type of way, it helps us to, again, kind of lessen the frustration of, well, why are they not doing it the way that I expect them to? I think that's a big thing for me is it allows me to take that step back and recognize not everyone's going to be on my time. Not every like that's just not realistic in any kind of way. And everybody has their own path and everyone has their own timeline that they work on things. And it's going to look different for everyone, whether that's, again, myself, my clients, my friends, my family, like it's all going to look different. But keeping that in mind helps not get frustrated when reality isn't what I want it to be.
This one comes with some caveats, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're not asking you to look at someone who's hurt you badly or things like that. We're not asking you to invite them back in their life because they want to improve. Like, we have to be clear on what we're saying on this. This is a way to have compassion for someone who you're struggling with, or a way to have compassion for yourself when you're struggling. If, however, you can't have compassion or you can't get to a place of peace with the other person, don't. If
Yeah.
your body's saying this person's too dangerous, then don't have compassion for them. That is 100% up to you. We're not telling you what to do and how to use this. We're saying that if you lean into this principle, it gives a way for grace, not because they will improve, because they want to improve.
Yeah. There's that
I haven't.
possibility that they want to.
Right. Every person I've talked to that's been in jail or anything like that, even when I talked to them in jail, they didn't want to be there. They wanted to go out. They wanted to do better. Anyone who I've worked with that's been trapped in substance abuse, they want a better life. So it's really not hard to see that this is kind of a universal truth and accept that just because they want something doesn't mean they're going to get it. Like,
Mhm.
again, we want to change some of the things about us. In order for that to happen, there has to be work put in. So we're not saying that work isn't needed. We're just saying that this is one of those, the reason it's part of the heal pillar is because in order for you to actually start healing yourself, in order for you to actually connect with you have to be okay that you were who you were and that the desire to be better is a good thing to have. Like not settling for what we have. I don't want to just keep living in an old house. I want my house to be comfortable. I want to improve it. We've been in it for 10 years. We've made lots of changes to it. We're making more changes as we go. That requires work. I'm not the same therapist that I was when I started. You're not the same coach that you were when you started. And now you're going to be a therapist and you got a whole new set of skills that you're going to open up to. And I want to stay in the place of I want to improve, not because I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough or anything like that. I never want to be a finished product.
Mhm.
And so if I lose the desire to improve, then I'm going to be okay. And the moment I become a finished product, I start breaking down. Like old people who just sit, their body eventually just breaks down and they die. I don't want to be that. I want to be someone who's improving. That doesn't mean I'm good at all my improvements. I've got some improvements that really probably need to get made around health issues. I know that I'm overweight. I know that I need to improve that and I want to improve it. And there are some issues getting in the way of that. And I got to figure those things out. So without the desire, I'm never going to get to getting the change
Yeah.
and be okay that maybe you stay at a want to improve for a long time or the person that hurt you may want to improve and they may still need to be locked away. People don't actually enjoy over a long period of time treating other people bad. In fact, they don't like it. And that doesn't mean that everyone needs to be out in public if they really can't manage themselves.
Yeah. I like that idea of recognizing that it's going to take work because I think we hit on that, but I think this principle really, with that caveat, helps it become more kind of solidified. The idea is more solidified. We can have the desire to do whatever we want. And kind of going back to even like your example from last week of the basketball player, right? And like being in the NBA, you can have the want and the desire to improve and grow in your athletic abilities. If you don't put in the work, though, there's not going to ever be any progress. And having to accept that for what it is and start recognizing where you can then put in the work and what the realistic capabilities are of that. And I think that kind of goes into what you're saying. Like, there are going to be some people who we can believe that they have a desire to improve and to do better. What is the reality of their situation and what is the reality of their capabilities of actually doing that and separating that, those kind of things.
Yeah, I like it. All right. So that leads us to kind of we're labeling these in anchor forms. Like this is the action anchors principles. Ownership and balance is what we can kind of group these ones into. So this is probably one that we diverge the most from DBT. However, the concept is still the same. So the principle 5 is we retain responsibility for solving our problems. The only thing we don't have on there is we may not have caused all our own problems. So kind of going back to what we were just talking about, that the desire isn't just where the responsibility ends. So I grew up probably in not the best, I know it wasn't the best neighborhood. My parents have a ton of learning disabilities. So about third grade, they weren't really able to help me with homework. Reading was not a very highly modeled behavior in my house, and we watched a ton of TV. That's how we managed the house. My dad was gone all the time because he worked graveyards, so he was sleeping during the day, and we just never saw him really. And my mom was a lunch lady at school, so she was gone during the school day, and then she was back with us, which was great because mom was there when we got home. All through elementary, junior high, and high school, I wasn't a good student. In fact, I didn't get a 3.0 until my senior year. I think I may have gotten like, A's and whatnot in first and second grade because everyone gets A's unless I could count. After third grade, fourth grade, and up, my parents really couldn't help me with things. Math, it was all on my own. English was all on my own. And I gave up on English in about sixth grade because I didn't feel like I could learn the rules. So I didn't have a great foundation for education. And so when I told my debate coach that I was going to be a psychologist, this sounds mean, but we had a really good relationship because she was my English teacher as well. So she knew how good or how not good I was at doing English assignments. I said, I think I'm going to be a psychologist when I grow up. And she just laughed. Now, again, we have a very good relationship, so it was okay. She's like, do you understand how many papers you have to write? Like, you actually have to write them, Milt. So that's why it was funny because she knew how many papers I didn't write for her. And I got to use my debate class for my English class my senior year, which means I didn't have to write that much because I made up all my crap. In fact, she was one of the judges. I tried out to be one of the speakers for graduation, and she knew that I hadn't prepared my speech. And I gave the best speech of all of the kids. And she's like, yeah, but I'm never going to hear that speech again. So, no, you can't be the speaker.
It's never going to be the same again.
And she was right because it wouldn't have been. It was a really good, it was a good speech. So, like, I say all that to give you context of like when I got into college, it was really, really hard at first. And we didn't have nearly the writing tools that we have now. Grad school was a lot better because they had a ton of writing tools, which was great. Like, I think the earlier versions of Grammarly was around when I was doing grad school and helping me put things correctly and not driving my grad school teachers nuts, circling all my grammar mistakes made a huge difference. And that's part of the reason I didn't pursue education or took so long to get my education is because I just didn't have a great foundation. However, no one was going to solve that for me. Now, there are a lot of tools, and I use those tools heavily now. In fact, I run everything I write almost through ChatGPT or some other tool like that, partly because I want it cleaned up so that people aren't focusing on, hey, what did you misspell? Where's the comma put improperly? Like, there's so many things, all of these rules. I am not a good English speaker. Like the last time I was tested, I got a fifth grade spelling level and reverse that. It was a fourth grade spelling level and a fifth grade reading level. I'm better now because I forced myself to read and I forced myself to do these things. So that's what I really like about this principle. It's never saying that like you didn't set up everything in your life. I wasn't given a good foundation for education. It wasn't reinforced at home. There wasn't an environment of learning at my house. There was an environment of discussion. So I learned how to think and I learned how to talk about things. And my dad was really good about like we could talk about whatever idea we wanted to. No idea was off the limits. And so because of that, I did start exploring ideas and I did start learning about things. And thank goodness the internet basically invented when I was, became big when I was in high school. And all of a sudden I had access to all this really cool stuff that I'd never had before. And then YouTube came along and I could go to YouTube University to learn different concepts because I don't learn as well through reading as I do through listening. And so I can listen to lectures and I can hear podcasts and long form interviews. And I still do that to this day to really understand things because I'm not the best reader. Except that I never settled either. I did for periods of time. Like you can look and see where like I gave up. And then I didn't. And then in grad school, I ended up getting a really good GPA and graduated well and, was able to pass my tests and do this for the last 15 years. Because I had to own my own life. And that's the piece that really matters is we're not trying to say that there aren't problems and use the effective tools that match your values to get through things. But I think it's important to recognize where you are and where you want to go. And then if you don't know how to get there, I used a ton of counselors. I talked to a lot of people. I figured out writing help. I didn't even realize there were writing centers at my school until I think my grad school. I used those things. That became the method. So there's nothing wrong with the fact that I know that my master's degree is not as researched as, say, someone from the 1980s because I had access to the internet and I can just pull up papers. I didn't have to go to this, the library on the weekends and look through all the catalogs and read all the things and find the excerpts. I accept that I didn't have as rigorous of a research background as, say, someone from the 80s who went and got their graduate degree and became a therapist. But that doesn't mean that I haven't stopped learning now. I read all the time. The amount of books that are on my table or in my Audible file, they're there all the time. And I'm constantly evolving because I don't want to just sit there, because I want to own that my knowledge is mine. And I would do this even if I didn't have to, even though I'm required to get 40 stupid hours of continuing education credits every 2 years, because I want to learn. I don't want to just be the kid who didn't know the answer anymore. But I also don't need to be the kid who had any good answer anymore either. I just need to be me.
I think that fits really well into just that idea of growth, and kind of like you preface this, the desire isn't going to get you to where you actually want to be, right? Because we can have a desire to do so many different things. I know I have a bucket list that is longer than it probably should be. And I'm never going to be able to check any of those off unless I put in the effort to do it. And I think that kind of just fits in really well with this principle of recognizing it is up to us to get better. It is up to us to put in the work to get to the life that we want for ourselves, and living that and living our values and being aligned in that kind of way. Nobody can do that for us because nobody knows what is genuinely like for us and what we actually want for ourselves beside ourselves. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually kind of a bridge to the very last one, the principle 7. Effective change requires holding multiple truths and finding balance and tension. So we've kind of been talking about this desire for change versus actual action and change. So these two truths kind of sits. We call this dialectical thinking. The extreme answers can be the answer. Like I have the desire to change, but I know how to get to the action. Or I have all the action, but I don't actually have it tied to any desire. So it's just me running around in circles. These two things create tension between us, these two truths. And that exists in other areas of our life. I work with a lot of people who want to die. They also want to live. That tension lives inside them. I don't have to disprove one or the other. I don't have to actually make one of them untrue. I can accept that both those things are true, that they can want to live and die, and then I can help them find a place in the middle that they can keep working towards. So when we're trying to balance all of this, which is really kind of what we're getting to, is ultimately this is about balance. As we move through these states, these pillars, the learn, heal, go, strengthen, it's always going to be about the synthesis of finding the truths and then finding that middle path through all of them, which is ultimately where, radical acceptance comes in, and what we'll get into in a few weeks, and all these things. So it's kind of, we wrap up because we're hitting the time, and I get we didn't give a ton of time to this principle. However, this principle will be covered down the road. But just that statement that you make all the time, that this is hard, that the easy road and the hard road are always right there. That's kind of the two truths that exist in almost everyone's life. I can continue doing what I'm doing, or I can make changes that are hard.
Yeah.
And if I do that, yeah, the tension's there, but I don't have to live in the extremes. I can find enough hardness that moves me forward and enough comfortableness that I'm moving forward at a rate that's gradual, not like forcing the issue.
Yeah. I like that. I think we hit on that in when we talk about the building mastery skill from DBT, of like that flow state, right? And if we jump to with the this is hard versus the comfortability, if we set our expectations so high in that this is hard kind of category and we
Yeah.
don't succeed, how defeating is that? And then how easy is it to then just slip back into that comfortability and that mindset of, why am I even going to try if I'm just going to fail? Well,
Yeah.
because we're jumping to the extreme, right? And if we put too much focus on like again, that change and that I want to do hard things. We don't give ourselves the credit or give ourselves the grace of recognizing what we're actually capable of and coming to, like you're saying, that middle ground and finding that balance between hard and achievable in order to see the progress that we want and to feel proud of ourselves for the
Yeah.
progress that we're making rather than this is too hard, I can't do it, or that's too hard, I'm never going to even try because it goes out of my comfort zone.
Well, it goes back to the day that I was standing there saying I want to be a psychologist. At that moment, it was too hard. I couldn't
Yeah.
do it. And you compare that to the truth of me getting my master's degree, the day that I actually went through the graduation ceremony and got my master's degree. It was hard. I'm 13 years into college. I should have a freaking PhD. The reality is, I needed this gradual step. So it was hard and doable all along the way. And I had to find a school that would work with me, and work in the way that my mind worked. And so I found one that did quarters as opposed to semesters because 16 weeks just didn't do it for me. Even 13-week semesters didn't do it for me. I went to a school that did 8-week quarters and I did 2 quarters every semester. So I did 4 classes, but I only did 2 at a time. And that worked so much better. All of those things is that incremental progress. It's hard and challenging as opposed to too hard, so I'll stay where I am.
Yeah, definitely. That's like one of my favorite things that we talk about is like finding that balance and that flow state. Cause I think it's just really exciting when you get to a point where you can see that happening. And it gets really exciting to see that progress and to see the growth that you're making rather than, again, like, "Ugh, I'm failing, I'm not good enough." And then all of those like myths, right? And those judgmental thoughts come in. And when those finally quiet down and you're actually able to be like, oh, holy shit, like, no, I'm doing good. I'm actually really doing good. That's
Yeah,
just like really exciting. So,
it is. And then when you get those big accomplishments, like you earned your way to that, you know.
yeah.
I'm sure we'll get some sports metaphors from you someday of like back when you were little softball player all the way up to through high school softball
Right.
player.
I know right now I'm thinking of the gym and like I'm seeing gains and I don't take my gym routine as seriously as if I wanted to see a ton of progress, I
Right.
would need to do a bunch of different things. But right now I'm just focusing on like the feeling that I have when I go and when I come out. And the other day I was looking in the mirror and I saw something that was like, "Oh, wait a sec." Like it was just so cool to see that little tiny progress, like that little muscle that I haven't seen before. And I was like, it was exciting. Yeah.
And that's you don't get there if you only focus on I have to progress versus I have to stay the same.
Yeah.
You get there because you're in the place of like challenging yourself while recognizing that you're at the place where you're at.
Yeah.
And then you get to see those little things and it opens your view because if you're focused on a destination, if you're focused on a place that you're supposed to be, you're going to miss all the things that were along the way.
Yeah. And again, it's just too hard and it feels defeating.
Well, you run out, you burn out because you don't have the
Yeah.
stamina to do the too hard yet. Like if you just ran to the gym and just worked out for 6 hours every day, how many days would you go to the gym?
I wouldn't. I
Yeah,
would not.
I'd probably go 1 or 2 days and then I'd be done because I'd never want to work myself because I wouldn't have the energy. But if
Yeah.
I can start going from 5,000 steps a day to 7,000 steps a day, and then I'm finally hitting 10,000 steps a day, and then I'm finally able to like jog. Like I remember when I finally was able to jog and not be crazy tired. Like that was a good day.
Yeah.
We want those incremental steps. So we don't need to just go to the extremes. And it doesn't mean that the extremes are wrong. It just means that trying to live in those is not going to be the long term success plan
Yeah.
that you really want.
Yeah. It's going to be kind of draining one way or another.
All right.
Love it.
Takeaways from today.
I think I'm kind of concerned that we're repeating ourselves, but the problem is like all of this, it is, right? Because it's just like we're breaking it down and we're trying to break it down as best we can into like little increments. But again, this entire model and our entire thought process with this is such a flowy state and that it's very fluid. And so I'm enjoying us coming up with new ways to explain things that is hopefully helping.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember is it's always going to feel like we're repeating ourselves, and maybe we are. And of course, if you have any comments that like, no, I feel like you guys have beat this horse dead, let it die. We're happy to hear that.
Please let us know.
But also, we hear ourselves saying the things we've said for a long, long time. And so it's always easy to remember, or hard to remember, that what we think is repeating may not be repeating for anyone else, because if it's a new concept to them, then we know an idea takes hearing it 5 or 6 or 7 or 80 times before it really becomes useful for us. So good news, you get us repeating ourselves all the time. My takeaway is it's just fun going through these basics, because like this is where we're most comfortable. Like these are the things we've been doing for so long, and why would we leave what works? When we're creating new, we're really just saying, hey, we want to find some ways to say this that are, I think, in a more creative way. I think they're more connecting. But if the other way or the old ways connect with you better, that's okay. We're just trying to come up with a way to develop that actually feels achievable. Even when I was sitting in my grad school classes and going through the developmental courses, I'm like, yeah, I'm not there. That's not where I'm supposed to be. But this way, instead of it being what achievement I'm supposed to be at, I can look at it and say, okay, I can resonate in this state for now. And I really can try to learn everything I can about this state, and then I'll move to the next state when it's wise.
Yeah. I appreciate that is the outlook that we have, because I think it takes away the pressure, right? Of again, like, well, I'm not doing it right. Well, if it's not happening the way you want it to, is this really what works for you, or should we shift into finding something that works better, kind of thing? I agree.
Cool. Yeah. See you all next time.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Rewrite Your Story. Take a moment to notice what story showed up for you today.
Remember, you're not your story. You're the one holding the pen.
And each moment is a chance to write a new chapter.
Be sure to join us next time as we keep exploring the path towards self-alignment.
We'll see you then.